So, when European powers first set foot in the Americas, they weren't just carrying flags and weapons. They were carrying ideas. Big ideas. Specifically, ideas about how you build a whole new society from the ground up. And today, we're diving into two completely different blueprints for building that new world. One based on absolute, top-down control, and the other on the consent of the people. Let's dig into how these two competing visions really took shape.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll talk about the basic challenge everyone faced on the frontier. Then, we'll look at Spain's blueprint for control and see how it stacks up against England's pretty wild experiment in self-rule. We'll put them side by side to see the differences, and then we'll trace how it all leads right to the founding of the Republic of Texas.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, Governing the Frontier. Just imagine for a second, you've arrived in this huge, unfamiliar land. After you figure out food and shelter, what's the next big problem? It's all about order.
No, really, think about it. Who gets to make the rules? And who makes sure people follow them? How do you keep everyone safe and make decisions together? Both the Spanish and the English had to figure this out, and their answers, well, they came from totally different worlds and could not have been more opposite.
Okay, so this brings us to Spain's plan. And to get their approach, you have to remember their history. Spain had just spent centuries in the Reconquista, a massive military and religious campaign, so their whole government was built around centralized power. It's no surprise that when they got to the Americas, their solution was basically an extension of that, a system designed to project the king's power across an entire ocean.
And the main tool they used was something called the Mission Presidio system. Just look at that definition. This wasn't a government for the people living on the frontier, it was a tool of the crown. You had the mission, which was for religious and social control, and the presidio, the fort, which was the army to back it all up.
And the goals here were crystal clear, and they were all about serving the king. Take control of the land, convert the native people, keep out your rivals like the French, and send resources back home. But take a look at what's missing from that list. See anything about the rights of the settlers or giving them a voice? Nope, not there.
So here's the bottom line for the Spanish model. Power flowed in only one direction, straight from the top down. Authority was something you were given orders to follow, not something you shared.
Now let's flip the coin completely for Section 3. The English approach, well, it was less of a rigid plan and way more of an experiment. They had a different background, with things like the Magna Carta that had already planted these little seeds of limited government. So their colonies kind of grew from the bottom up, starting with the settlers themselves.
And at the very heart of this experiment was this totally revolutionary idea called the social contract. This idea just turns everything upside down. It says that government isn't some divine right that a king has. No, it's an agreement that people make with each other to create a system for their own protection and benefit.
And this wasn't just some philosophical theory they talked about. They put it into practice almost the second they arrived. In 1619, Virginia created the House of Burgesses. That's the first elected assembly in the colonies. And just a year later, the Pilgrims, before they even got off the boat, wrote up the Mayflower Compact, their own agreement for self-government.
This quote from the Mayflower Compact says it all. Just listen to that wording. Combine ourselves together. They're not waiting for a king to tell them what to do. They are taking the initiative, creating their own government for their own better ordering and preservation.
And that right there, that sums up the English model perfectly. Authority wasn't handed down from on high. It came from the people it was governing. It is a complete 180 from the Spanish system. Which brings us to Section 4, where we get to put these two competing visions for how to run a society right next to each other. And this is where the differences really pop.
When you boil it all down, it's actually this simple. Spain's system was a tool for the king. England's system was a tool for the community.
This chart makes it super clear. Let's start with the purpose. For Spain, it was all about securing land for the crown. For England, it was about making laws and keeping order for the settlers. Now, what about the source of power? For Spain, it's the King of Spain. Simple as that. For England, it's the consent of the people being governed. And because of that, you get two totally different structures. One is top-down and run by the military and the church. The other is bottom-up and run by elected representatives.
So what? Why does this all matter? Well, in our last section, we're going to see how these clashing ideas about government weren't just stuck in the past. They actually set the stage for a huge conflict right here on the Texas frontier.
Think about it.
When American settlers who grew up with this English idea of self-government started moving into Texas, they brought those expectations with them. They expected to have a say. But what they found was a Mexican government that had inherited that old Spanish system, centralized and top-down. These two worlds were heading for a collision. It was like a clash of political DNA.
You can literally trace the path here. First, the English traditions of self-government get established in America. Second, those ideas cause friction when settlers bring them to Texas, which is run by a centralized Mexican government. And third, when Texans finally declared their independence, what's the first thing they do? They write a constitution based on the U.S. Constitution, locking in those exact same principles of self-rule.
This chart really tells the whole story visually. Over here with the Spanish monarchy, you've got 100% of the power flowing from the top. But over here with the English colonies and later the Republic of Texas, you see this massive shift. Power now flows up from the governed, or as the U.S. Constitution famously puts it, from we the people.
So when you step back, the big takeaway is this. That battle between a government of control and a government of consent, the one that played out on the American frontier, wasn't just some dusty old history lesson. That very choice is what shaped the foundation of American democracy as we know it today.
Which kind of leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? When you're building a society from scratch, what's the most important rule? Is it order imposed from above? Or is it having a voice from below?